I know who killed our maid. I have known all my life. But I could not turn in the person I loved to the police. Even now, 79 years behind me, lying in this hospice bed where the walls smell faintly of bleach and wilted lilies, those words taste like rust on my tongue. I never told anyone, not the detectives, not Kevin, not even Karen when she was still alive. But I think my time's running out, and secrets like this don't stay buried. They have claws. They scratch until you bleed. It happened on a warm September morning, a Tuesday, when the air still held on to the last lazy breath of summer. Karen came home with a knife in her hand and blood on her blouse. I was still in uniform then, a detective with the Boston Police Department. My job, my duty, was to call it in, report what I'd seen. But love makes cowards out of men. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments below. I didn't call. That same morning, Sophie, our maid, was found dead in the park, her throat slit, her body laid under a maple tree as if someone had arranged her there like a broken doll. I knew the moment I saw the knife in Karen's trembling hands that every piece of evidence would point to us. To her. So I did what I thought any man in love would do. I hid it. I wrapped the knife in an old towel and shoved it into a crate in our neighbor's basement. They were in Italy at the time, celebrating their anniversary. No one would look there. When I asked Karen, my sweet, quiet Karen, how she could do something like this, she just stared at me with wide, wet eyes and whispered, "It wasn't me, Daniel. I swear to God, it wasn't me. Someone's setting me up." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But Sophie had been more than just our maid. She'd been my escape. She was young, blonde, 24, with a waist you could circle with one hand and a laugh that could break a man in half. I told myself I loved Karen, and maybe I did in my own way, but I couldn't stay away from Sophie. Karen always knew. And jealousy is a quiet, vicious thing. When the police searched Sophie's tiny apartment, they found a diary. In it, Sophie wrote about me, her feelings, her dreams, her fantasies. She even mentioned the nights we'd meet at that cheap hotel out on Route 12 when Karen thought I was working late. I'd been careful, but not careful enough. The diary was enough for the department to suspect me. But Karen? Karen was the easy target. A wife scorned. A motive wrapped up neat with a bow. Only one thing didn't fit, the bicycle. A neighbor saw a small boy riding away from the park the morning Sophie died. Kevin's bicycle. Our adopted son's bicycle. Kevin was 9 at the time. He was Karen's idea. We couldn't have kids, and I wasn't interested in raising someone else's. But she wanted him so badly that I gave in. For years, I resented the boy without meaning to. He'd look at me with those green eyes, so calm, so unreadable, and I'd see nothing of myself there. I didn't ask him about the bicycle back then. I didn't dare. Karen died 4 years later. Same neighborhood. Same September. Same kind of knife. They found her in the garden behind our house, her body arranged the way Sophie's had been. And this time, there was no one else for the police to suspect. I spent months in court fighting charges I couldn't disprove. No one believed me when I said I didn't kill her. But there was something that haunted me more than prison, more than whispers from neighbors, more than the cold stare of Sophie's grieving parents. Something Karen had said 2 nights before she died. She'd been quiet all evening, sitting out on the porch swing, the wood creaking beneath her. When I finally asked what was wrong, she turned to me, her voice low, almost shaking. "Daniel, I think Sophie's killer is still out there." And then, almost too soft to hear, "And I think they're watching us." I laughed it off at the time. God, how stupid I was. Now, decades later, lying in this hospice bed, I still don't know if Karen killed Sophie, if Kevin was somehow involved, or if there's someone else, someone we never even considered. But tomorrow, a young journalist is coming to see me. Says she's been researching the Parkside murders. Says she has something I need to hear. I haven't slept since she called. Because in her voice, I heard something cold. She said she found a photograph. And in that photograph was Kevin's bicycle. And another shadow. Someone I thought I'd buried a long, long time ago. I didn't sleep that night. The rain hammered against the hospice window like 1,000 tiny fists, and each one carried a memory I tried to forget. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the slow tick of the clock and the distant groans of the building settling under the weight of so many ghosts. At dawn, she came. The journalist, Emily Reese. Young, sharp-eyed, no older than 30. She introduced herself softly, as though she knew not to scare an old dying man. But the moment she sat in the chair by my bed, I felt the shift in the air. She carried a manila folder on her lap. "Mr. Clark," she said, opening it carefully, "I've been studying the Parkside murders for 3 years. I believe there was a third person at both crime scenes. Someone no one ever investigated." I laughed, though it came out broken, like a cough. "Lady, they investigated everyone." "Me." "Karen." "Sophie's family." "Hell, even the mailman." There was nothing left. She didn't flinch. Instead, she slid a photograph across my blanket. A grainy shot, taken from the old security camera near the park entrance, dated September 17, 1983. Kevin's bicycle. Parked by the bench where Sophie's body was found. And behind it, a shadow. Tall. Lean. Male. Not Kevin. "Where did you get this?" My voice cracked. "It was buried in the evidence archive," she said. "Filed under miscellaneous and never logged. Whoever handled the case overlooked it." I stared at the photo until my hands shook. Kevin was only 9 years old. I couldn't imagine him holding a knife. Couldn't imagine his small hands gripping Sophie's throat. But then I remembered something. That morning, when I found Karen in the kitchen shaking, the knife still slick in her hands. Kevin wasn't in the house. He came home hours later, saying he'd been at school. But school had called earlier asking why Kevin wasn't there. I never told anyone. "Mr. Clark?" Emily leaned in, lowering her voice. "Do you know who this man could be?" I shook my head, but inside, the memories began crawling back, fragments I'd buried. Sophie's diary. The pages where she mentioned someone else. Someone she was afraid of. "If Daniel ever finds out, it'll destroy everything." At the time, I thought she meant me. I thought she was talking about our affair. But what if she wasn't? What if there was someone else? Emily studied me for a long moment. "Did your wife ever mention anything unusual before she died?" I hesitated. Then nodded slowly. 2 nights before Karen was murdered, she'd confessed something I never understood. We were on the porch. She wouldn't look at me. "Daniel," she whispered, "I think Kevin knows more than he says." "Kevin?" I'd laughed, brushing it off. "I saw him that night. In the hallway. Talking to someone." But when I asked who it was, he swore no one was there. I didn't believe her then. Now, decades later, the weight of her words crashed down like a hammer. I looked at Emily. "What are you saying?" "That my son had something to do with it." "I'm saying," she replied carefully, "that someone used Kevin. Maybe both murders are connected by the same person. Someone who wanted you to think Karen was guilty. Someone who wanted you to suffer." A cold shiver ran through me. "Who?" Emily leaned back, her expression unreadable. "That's what I'm trying to find out." That evening, after she left, I asked one of the hospice nurses for my old trunk. It had been sitting untouched for decades. Inside, under yellowed newspaper clippings and brittle police reports, I found Sophie's diary. Page after page of confessions. But then, near the end, a passage I'd never noticed before, written in frantic, messy ink. "He said if I told anyone, he'd kill me. He watches the house. He knows about Kevin. He knows about Karen. I don't know what to do anymore. God, I think he's everywhere." No name. No clue. Just fear, etched deep into every stroke of the pen. I called Emily immediately. "There's something you need to see," I said. But she didn't pick up. Instead, a man answered. A deep, rasping voice I hadn't heard in 40 years. "Daniel," he said slowly, almost gently, "you should stop digging." Then the line went dead. For the first time in decades, I locked my hospice room door. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because I knew that voice. And the man it belonged to had been dead for 30 years. I didn't tell anyone about the phone call. Not Emily. Not the nurses. Not even the night staff that wheeled me back to my bed after I nearly collapsed in the hallway. Because there was no explaining it. That voice, deep, raspy, unmistakable, belonged to Elliot Graves. And Elliot Graves had been dead for 30 years. I was there the night they pulled his body from the river. I'd seen the pale blue lips, the bloated hands, the lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Back then, he was my partner at the department, my mentor, my friend. The man who taught me how to lie to suspects without blinking, how to find a murderer in a room full of saints. And Elliot was also the man Karen hated most in the world. Because he loved Sophie. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over every detail in my head, every half-forgotten conversation. There had always been tension between Elliot and Sophie, whispers in the precinct about inappropriate closeness, but I never cared back then. She was mine, and I thought she loved me too. But Sophie's diary. I read it again carefully this time. Every word. And there it was, tucked between two ordinary entries about her day. E. won't stop calling. He says if I don't end things with D, he'll ruin us both. I wish I'd never met him. I wish I'd never told him about Kevin. Kevin. I froze. Why the hell would Sophie write about Kevin? Back in 1983, Kevin was 9 years old. Adopted. Quiet. Always drawing strange sketches in his notebooks. But Sophie adored him. She'd spend hours helping him with homework, reading him bedtime stories when Karen and I were fighting. I thought it was innocent. I wanted to believe it was innocent. But what if Elliot Graves had known something about Kevin I didn't? The next morning, Emily came back. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes. I tried calling you last night, she said. Your phone was busy. I lied. I fell asleep early. She raised an eyebrow but let it go. Then she handed me a thin envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents she'd pulled from a sealed archive, personnel files, adoption records, and something else. Mr. Clark, she said softly, did you know that Kevin's adoption papers were falsified? My breath caught. What? She nodded. The orphanage listed one set of parents, but cross-referenced state records show a completely different origin. Someone wanted to hide where Kevin came from. I stared at the papers in my trembling hands. Who signed them? Elliot Graves. She whispered. I felt the room tilt under me. Elliot arranged Kevin's adoption. Without telling me. Without telling Karen. Why? That night I dreamed of the river. I saw Elliot's face pale beneath the water, his eyes open and accusing. Behind him, something darker stirred, a shadow with no shape, no edges, only teeth. When I woke, the sheets were soaked with sweat, and the faint sound of a boy's laughter echoed in my ears. Kevin's laughter. I had to know the truth. I asked Emily to track down Kevin. We hadn't spoken in decades. After Karen's murder, he cut all ties, moved to another state, and changed his name. He never visited. Never called. Not even when I was on trial. Do you think he'll talk to you? She asked. I don't know, I said. But if he doesn't, I'll know why. That evening, as I sat staring out the hospice window, I remembered the night Karen died. The police never found the murder weapon. But I did. 2 weeks after her funeral, while cleaning the garage, I found a bloody knife wrapped in an old towel, hidden behind Kevin's old bicycle. I buried it in the woods behind the house, too afraid to know what it meant. And now, all these years later, I wonder if someone knew. If someone followed me that night. because when I woke up this morning, there was mud on my shoes. I haven't left this hospice bed in 2 days. Emily returned with news the next morning. She found Kevin. And he agreed to meet us. But before she left, she looked at me strangely and said, "Mr. Clark, are you sure you want answers? Because I'm starting to think Sophie's murder, Karen's murder, and Kevin's past are all connected. And whoever orchestrated this." She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're not done yet. That night, someone slipped a note under my hospice door. I opened it with shaking hands. 4 words. Written in Sophie's handwriting. Stop digging, Daniel. Kevin arrived on a gray Thursday morning. Emily wheeled me into the hospice's small visitors' lounge, where the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. My hands trembled as I waited, gripping the armrests so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then he walked in. I almost didn't recognize him. Kevin wasn't the quiet, frail boy I remembered. He was tall now, broad-shouldered, his hair threaded with gray. But his eyes hadn't changed. Still that strange, unreadable green, the color of deep river water where sunlight doesn't reach. "Dad," he said. I froze. He hadn't called me that since the trial. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Emily broke it. "Kevin," she said gently, sliding the old photograph across the table. "Do you remember this? Your bicycle was found at the park the day Sophie was murdered." Kevin's jaw tightened. "That was 40 years ago," he said flatly. "I don't remember." But I saw the flicker in his eyes. He was lying. "You weren't in school that morning," I said quietly. His gaze darted to me, sharp as glass. "You kept track of me like that?" "No," I whispered. "The school called. Said you never showed up?" Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, Kevin leaned back and sighed. "I was there. At the park. But I didn't kill Sophie." Emily leaned forward. "Then why lie?" He hesitated, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Because I saw who did." The room went dead silent. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. Kevin looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. "I can't," he whispered. "If I tell you, it'll destroy everything. Kevin, Sophie died. Karen died. I almost went to prison because of this. Tell me." But he shook his head violently and stood up. "I shouldn't have come," he said, and before either of us could stop him, he walked out. Emily and I sat there in stunned silence. "That wasn't nothing," she finally said. "He knows more than he's saying." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "He's hiding something." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Sophie had written in her diary. "He knows about Kevin." What the hell did that mean? At 3 a.m., I woke to find someone standing in my hospice room. The figure was tall, backlit by the faint glow from the hallway. For one awful second, I thought it was Elliot Graves. But when they stepped closer, I saw Kevin's face. He looked older than he had that afternoon, somehow, worn, haunted. "You need to stop digging," he said softly. "Kevin, I'm serious," he interrupted, his voice shaking. "You don't want to know the truth, Dad. It'll kill you." I sat up, heart pounding. "You were 9 years old, Kevin. 9. Whatever happened that day, it wasn't your fault." He stared at me for a long moment, then whispered something I'll never forget. "Was I 9, though?" And then he walked out without another word. The next morning, I told Emily what happened. Her face went pale. "Mr. Clark," she said slowly, "I found something in the adoption records. Something you need to see." She pulled out a photocopy of Kevin's original intake file from the orphanage. Date of birth, unknown. Estimated age at adoption, between 7 and 11. I felt the blood drain from my face. "But they told us he was 9. "They lied?" she whispered. "And guess who signed off on it?" I didn't have to guess. Elliot Graves. That night, I went back to Sophie's diary one more time, flipping through pages I thought I'd memorized. And that's when I noticed something strange. Tucked inside the back cover was a folded scrap of paper I'd never seen before. On it, in Sophie's hurried handwriting: "If anything happens to me, look under the floorboards in Kevin's room." My heart nearly stopped. The next day, Emily and I drove to the old house, the one I hadn't set foot in since Karen died. Dust choked the air, cobwebs draped the corners like shrouds. Kevin's childhood bedroom was just as we'd left it, faded posters on the walls, a cracked baseball glove on the shelf. Emily pried up the floorboards while I held my breath. And there, wrapped in yellowing newspaper, was a small metal box. Inside was a stack of Polaroids. Of Sophie. Sophie laughing. Sophie sleeping. Sophie in our house. Taken from the hallway. From behind the bedroom door. And in the reflection of one photo, standing in the corner, half hidden in shadow, was a tall man with a cigarette between his fingers. Elliot Graves. Emily dropped the photo, her hands trembling. "But he was dead when Sophie was killed," she whispered. I shook my head, my voice barely a breath. "No, Emily. I think we were wrong about everything." That night, I dreamed again of the river. Only this time, Elliot wasn't in it. Karen was. And she was smiling. Emily spread the Polaroids out on the table between us like cards in a rigged game. "Mr. Clark," she said, her voice trembling, "Elliot Graves is in these photos. But Sophie was murdered after he died. That means—" I cut her off. "That means he's alive!" I could barely get the words out. My old partner. My friend. The man I buried in my mind 30 years ago. And if Elliot was alive, he'd been watching us all along. I called Kevin. No answer. Then I called again. This time, he picked up, his voice low, shaky, nothing like the confident man who'd stood before me 2 days ago. "Dad," he whispered. "Kevin, where are you?" I've been remembering things," he said, his breath uneven, ragged. "I thought they were dreams, but they're not. I think he used to come into my room at night when I was a kid." I went cold. "What are you saying?" Kevin's voice cracked like old glass. "I think he's my father." I dropped the phone. It clattered against the table, but Kevin's words stayed lodged in my skull like a bullet. Sophie's diary had mentioned Elliot. The adoption papers had his signature. Kevin's estimated age had been between 7 and 11. Elliot had arranged everything. Had he planted Kevin in our family? Had Karen known? Was Sophie involved? My head spun until I could barely breathe. Emily stayed calm where I couldn't. "If Elliot's alive," she said, "then we need to figure out why he wanted Kevin with you." Maybe Karen knew something. Maybe Sophie did too. I remembered Karen's last words, the night before she died. "Daniel, I think Sophie's killer is still out there. And I think they're watching us." She'd been right. Emily dug deeper into sealed archives, pulling favors I didn't want to know about. When she came back 2 days later, her face was pale. "Mr. Clark," she whispered, sitting across from me, "Sophie wasn't just your maid." "I know that." I muttered bitterly. "No," she said. "You don't. Sophie was working undercover." I stared at her. She was an informant for internal affairs. She was investigating Elliot Graves for misconduct, corruption, and— Emily hesitated. "Child trafficking?" The world tilted sideways. "Sophie knew," I whispered. Emily nodded. "And I think that's why she died." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my life like a bad film reel. Karen's cold silence the week before Sophie's murder. Kevin's bicycle at the park. Elliot's shadow in the Polaroids. Sophie's trembling handwriting about someone watching her. It all circled back to one thing. Kevin. The next morning, Kevin showed up at the hospice. He looked different this time, wild-eyed, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He shut the door behind him and locked it. "I remember," he said hoarsely. What do you remember? I asked carefully. His gaze darted around the room like a trapped animal. The knife, he whispered. Sophie's knife. It was in my hands. There was blood, so much blood. And Elliot was there. He told me it was an accident. I froze. You were 9, Kevin, I said softly. You couldn't have. Was I 9? He snapped, cutting me off. Was I, Dad? Or was I 11? Or 13? How old was I when you brought me into that house? I couldn't answer him. Kevin paced the room, his breath ragged. He told me not to tell anyone. Said they'd take me away if I did. Said Sophie was trying to separate us. Kevin, I whispered, did Elliot tell you to hurt Sophie? Kevin stopped pacing. His back was to me. His shoulders trembled. Then he said something that shattered me. I don't know if I hurt her, or if he made me think I did. Emily came in moments later, holding a folder so thick it looked like it had been pulled straight from hell. Mr. Clark, she said breathlessly, I found Elliot's financial records. He siphoned money into a private account for 20 years after his supposed death. And guess whose name is on the account now? Whose? I asked. She looked at Kevin. Yours. Kevin's face went pale. I don't. But before he could finish, the lights in the hospice flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. In the darkness, somewhere down the hall, a door creaked open. And a voice, low, rasping, unmistakable, whispered through the silence. You should have left it buried, Daniel. Emily grabbed my arm. Kevin froze, staring toward the sound. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Because it was him. Elliot Graves. Alive. Watching us. The lights came back one by one, buzzing weakly, casting long shadows on the hospice walls. Kevin stood frozen by the window. Emily gripped the edge of my bed, her breath shallow. And in the doorway, Elliot Graves. Older now, gaunt, but those cold gray eyes hadn't changed. You're supposed to be dead, I whispered. He smiled faintly. So are you. Emily moved first, stepping between us. Elliot Graves, you faked your death. You framed your partner. You. Stop. His voice was low but sharp enough to cut glass. You don't understand what you've walked into. I forced myself to sit up, even though my chest burned. Then make me understand, Elliot. Why Sophie? Why Karen? Why all of this? He looked at me for a long moment, then turned his gaze toward Kevin. It was always about him, he said softly. Kevin stiffened. Me? Yes, Elliot said. You were never supposed to know, but Daniel was never meant to be your father. You were mine. The room tilted, the air thick with silence. No, I said, shaking my head. That's impossible. The orphanage said. The orphanage lied. Elliot interrupted calmly. I pulled strings. I made sure you and Karen would take him. I needed him somewhere safe, somewhere I could watch him without anyone suspecting. Safe? Emily spat. You threw a 9-year-old into the middle of 2 murders. You call that safe? Elliot's jaw tightened. You think Sophie was just a maid? She was a cop, Daniel. Internal Affairs sent her after me. She discovered Kevin's real identity. She knew I'd been hiding him. And so you killed her? I said, my voice flat. No. He shook his head. I didn't. Kevin turned slowly, his face pale. Then who did? Elliot hesitated, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I found Sophie in the park, he said quietly. But she was already dead. You were there, Kevin. Don't you remember? Kevin's breath hitched. I saw the blood. I saw the knife. But I don't. You were drugged, Elliot said. I found the syringe in the grass. Someone wanted you to believe you killed her. My stomach twisted. Who? Elliot's gaze shifted to me, slow, deliberate. Karen, he said softly. It felt like the world stopped. No, I said, shaking my head. She loved Kevin. She loved you more, Elliot said. And she hated Sophie. She found out about the affair. She followed Sophie to the park that morning. When I got there, Sophie was dead and Karen was standing over her. She begged me not to tell you. I couldn't breathe. And you covered it up? I had to, he said. Karen promised she'd never hurt anyone again. I thought it would end there. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. But Karen died the same way Sophie did. Arranged, the knife, the blood. That wasn't you. No, Elliot said. That wasn't me. Then he looked at Kevin. That was him. Kevin stared back at Elliot, his expression unreadable. You're lying. Am I? Elliot asked softly. Karen confronted you that night, Kevin. I was there. She screamed at you, called you a murderer, said she wished they'd never adopted you. And you snapped. Kevin's hands trembled violently. No. No, I didn't. I didn't. You don't remember because you don't want to remember. Elliot whispered. It's easier that way, isn't it? Emily stepped forward, pointing at Elliot. You're manipulating him, just like you did when he was a kid. Kevin's breathing grew ragged. His eyes darted between us like a cornered animal. Stop, he whispered. Stop talking. Kevin, I said softly. Look at me. You were 9. If this is true, it wasn't your fault. Do you hear me? It wasn't. Stop. Kevin screamed. And then he collapsed to his knees, sobbing into his hands. Elliot knelt beside him, putting a hand on his shoulder. But Kevin flinched like he'd been burned. Don't touch me, he choked out. I remember now. It wasn't Karen. It wasn't me. He looked up at me with tear-streaked cheeks. It was you, Dad. The room spun. What? I whispered. Kevin's voice was shaking, but steady enough to cut me open. You were there. You followed Sophie that morning. You found out she was working with internal affairs, spying on Elliot, spying on you. You killed her, Dad. And Elliot helped you cover it up. That's why the knife was hidden in the neighbor's basement. That's why you were never investigated properly. That's why Elliot faked his death, to protect you. I stared at Elliot. And he didn't deny it. Karen had found out years later. She threatened to go to the police. And that's why she died. I wanted to scream. Deny it. Say Kevin was wrong. Say Elliot was lying. But somewhere deep inside, the memories surfaced like oil through water. Sophie's laugh, Sophie's blood, Karen's scream when she saw the truth. And my hands. My hands on the knife. Elliot stood slowly, his voice low and tired. I've been protecting you for 40 years, Daniel. But it ends now. Emily's face was pale, her recorder still running in her lap. Kevin just stared at me, broken, shaking, his whole childhood shattered in a single sentence. I opened my mouth to speak. To beg. To explain. But then Elliot stepped closer and whispered in my ear. You told me once you couldn't live without Karen. Maybe it's time you join her. That night, Elliot disappeared. Emily turned everything over to the police. And Kevin walked out of the hospice without looking back. Now I sit here, staring at the peeling ceiling, waiting for the end. I thought the truth would set me free. Instead, it buried me alive. Because I know who killed Sophie. I've always known. And it wasn't Elliot. It wasn't Karen. It wasn't Kevin. It was me. But the strange thing? I still don't remember doing it.